Good morning, everybody. This episode of Coffee and Football is brought to you by my bookie.
My gooders are in the car. I forgot them this morning. So here's my human gooders. Sorry. Apologies.
All right, let me restart now. This episode of Coffee and Football is brought to you by my bookie. Be sure that you're in the game with the good folks at my bookie. Jerry Hamilton, obviously not in the game with his gooders, but that's okay. By the way, I'm Blake Monroe, joined every morning by Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton. Guys, tell us where you're checking in from, what you're drinking. Get your questions in. Chat is already very lively this morning. And we're going to jump right into it because we got an action-packed show today, guys. There's been a little movement on the line, and I do mean little. Texas now a 4-point favorite that opened at 3.5. Of course, we talked about this yesterday. ESPN Analytics giving Texas a 76.4 chance to win this game.
Bobby sent me his analytics and it was 88%. So we need to start posting more. But look, it's both coaches took to the mic yesterday. I think Texas is the healthier football team. I know Texas fans are like, what? Cedric Baxter, Derek Williams. But I think Georgia, I listened to Kirby Smart's press conference yesterday. I know we'll get this comments on what he said about Sark in Texas, but Mikael Williams, Jared Wilson, the center, obviously Ratledge is out. Where are they at on Smale Mondon, one of their better backers? So are people leaning that way? Or are they leaning that Georgia hasn't played a high-level game this year? They played a high-level half against Bama, but they haven't played a high-level game yet this year. Is there not belief in that right now in the betting world? Where are we at right now? Because if Georgia's going to turn in a national champion contending performance, it's going to have to be Saturday because they haven't done it this year.
I would say this. If there's one team in college football that can handle depth issues, it's the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah.
And that's why they are who they are. And so that depth will be tested, to Jerry's point. It's already being tested at wide receiver and has been all year because of some off-field issues that were very strange or just unbecoming, even is a better word maybe. But I agree with it. Jerry did mention something that happened on the Longhorn side. For those that didn't hear yesterday afternoon, Steve Sarkisian talked about Derek Williams, the safety out of New Iberia Westgate. He is officially out for the year, according to Steve Sarkisian. Young man apparently tore an ACL. We can't be sure of that. It's either an ACL or MCL, but Sark said he is out and will have surgery in 2 weeks. So we certainly wish him nothing but the best. Played a hell of a game against a defeated Oklahoma team, made a terrific play to cause a fumble and had just got back in the game. Somebody asked us last night, Jerry, on Talking Ball, whether or not Derek Williams would be available for a potential redshirt year. He would, because the OU game was actually only his fourth game this year. He missed 2 games with the hamstring. Then there was the week-long bye. So Derek Williams will be a redshirt sophomore next year if he so chooses to be so. But our wishes and thoughts are out to him as well. A lot of news and notes to go over today as well. A lot of different things going on around the state as far as football is concerned. But let's go out of state right now and listen to Kirby Smart's press conference, a little piece of it from yesterday.
All right, guys, moving on to Texas for us. Obviously a huge matchup. It's going to be a top 10 two teams in the country. A lot of respect for Sark. I've gotten to know Sark really well over the last couple of years. We take a trip every year together and really enjoy getting to know him and have a lot of respect for the job he does. I mean, the most complete team that we've seen or faced this year and probably in multiple years. When you look at what they're doing defensively, offensively, and special teams, they are clearly one of the best teams in the country with what they do. Got a great quarterback, great defense, great scheme. Should be a great matchup. And this is really what you come to Georgia to play in these moments. Once again on the road, going to a place that I've never been. I assume none of our players have ever been there either for a game. So it should be exciting, great TV, and looking for an opportunity for us to get better, because that's the most important thing is, can we show some kind of consistent improvement and play more consistent as a team. That's our goal. So that I'll open it up.
Jerry, you hear, is that Kirby Smart playing possum, best team he's seen in a couple of years, that kind of talk? He trying to get his thumb under the nail there.
Yeah, I think if you could have seen the script he was reading off of, it would have said John Calipari said this. I mean, yes, it's Georgia against the world talk time is what it is. But in all honesty, it needs to be, because their margin for error went way down after they lost at Alabama. And even after Texas, they still go to Ole Miss and they have Tennessee at home. Their margin for error goes away if they lose to Texas Saturday. Away. They don't have one left. That's it. They have to win out. So that is, and I've said before, earlier this week, obviously it's Tuesday, it's earlier in the week, Monday or Sunday, but if Texas doesn't get Georgia's absolute best game of the year, then I'll start to say, yeah, maybe all these off the field issues have kind of taken a toll a little bit. Having to remove multiple receivers, all the things going on, because this should be Texas, and this is what you want. This is why all these kids come to Texas and Georgia. You want Georgia's best shot in your stadium Saturday night, and you want to give them your best shot, and you want to come out victorious. But if Georgia doesn't play their best game of the year, then I think some people are going to be scratching their heads a little bit.
Jerry, you're 100% right. And Kirby's right. This is why guys go to Georgia, they go to Texas, et cetera, is for these games. And frankly, you can tell that by the recruiting visitor list.
Yes.
I mean, they want to be part of the – you could tell it last year from the Alabama-Texas visitor list in Tuscaloosa. These are the games they want to be at. We talked about that, and y'all talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Colin Simmons, I'll never forget the first time I went to Duncanville. I think it was spring of his freshman year before sophomore year. I may be off on that one. I think it was to see Simmons at Duncanville. It's not the first time I'd ever been there. But he said, I'm playing in the SEC back then. I'll never forget the first conversation. Look, if this is why Texas is in the SEC, these games. And by the way, for people that don't think there's must-get recruits and recruiting, Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill are must-get recruits and recruiting.
Change the trajectory of the defensive side of the ball for Texas.
Yep. I mean, and there's these guys came to – Anthony Hill was coming down to SEC schools, right? You think Isaiah Bond would have transferred to Texas if Texas won the Big 12? Probably not. You think Cedric Baxter would have? You think the recruiting in Florida, the recruiting in Georgia, all these guys visiting this weekend, this is why they're here. And I'll say this, from a recruiting standpoint, if Texas was playing Oklahoma in Austin this weekend, I don't think the visitors list would be as jam-packed as it is with Georgia. And that's not a shot at Oklahoma. The Texas-Oklahoma game matters for the Texas fans and Oklahoma fans so much as it should. But for recruits in the Southeast, it doesn't matter as much as Texas versus Georgia or Texas versus Bama. Not even close.
Or Texas versus Florida.
Exactly. So, I mean, look, this game this weekend, and Blake, we can bring up the visitors list. We have look at some 2025s. Look, it's not a complete list. We're over 50. There's going to be 50 plus combined 5-star, 4-star prospects in the 25, 6, and 7 classes on campus. And the best 2028 running back in the state, Micah Rhodes from Klein Oak, he's coming as well. Bobby Rhodes, his grandfather, is one of the all-time sack leaders at Texas. But your list here, I mean, just look at this. Javian Hilson, Cocoa, Bachtu Grayson, Loganville, Georgia, Kevin Wynn, Greensboro, Georgia, Walter Mathis, Savannah, Georgia, Justice Terry, Manchester, Georgia. Those guys aren't as jazzed up about a Texas-Oklahoma game as a Texas-Georgia game. And that's just the reality of it. I think Texas remains in a good spot for Terry and Hilson, but you got to close out all these recruitments. NIL day and age. Bachtu, this is his official visit. I think Texas is in a decent spot there. It's just battles. These are big boy battles. And I think Texas is doing everything they can in recruiting of Bachtu and some of these guys. These are just big league battles. I mean, Kevin Wynn has Georgia right there in the mix. He's 40 miles south of Athens. Walter Mathis, LSU commitment. Justice Terry has Georgia, and he has Miami, and he has Alabama. I mean, these are real recruitments. And that 26 list, Blake, I know we Ivory Martin asked if Madden Framo is going to be there. We're waiting to hear on that one. South End Zone Queen, I'm going to answer. Owasu Boateng going to Colorado. Texas hadn't made a big push there for Owasu Boateng. He's scheduled to visit late in November, but we'll see on that. Let's see. Kevin Wynn, somebody asked about Kevin Wynn. He's already officially visited. This will be an unofficial. The 26th list, Amari Latimer, Tyrone, Georgia, Sandy Creek High. Jabari Mack, I added him 2 days ago. He told me he's coming in Destrehan, Louisiana. Obviously, John Turntine's an absolute stud. We added him. Tyler Atkinson, 5-star linebacker. We played the huddle before. He's a freak. Grayson, Georgia. Dylan Berryman, Monroe, Louisiana. A guy I think Texas leads on right now. Them and LSU going at it. Noah Clark. Again, this is one 4-star defensive lineman from North Carolina. He put out yesterday he's coming to the game. Would he be here if it was Texas, Oklahoma? Probably not. But where is he at? North Carolina. You know who's a big school in North Carolina? It's Georgia. It's Georgia and Clemson. I mean, those are the two big schools for in the state of Carolina for those kids, somewhat Tennessee. But this game is bringing in all the guys you want. Jamie French, Jamie French has been coming in. Albert Martinez, he's actually getting in Friday. So it's a big time visitors list. And this is just the non-committed guys. The committed list, Diabelle's coming in. Somebody mentioned Jamie French, Sharma, Myron Charles, Nick Townsend, you name it, Caleb Chester, Elijah Barnes, the Colemans, John Mills is a maybe. Everybody is trying to get to this game this weekend, and it's going to be I think it'll be 50-plus combined 5 stars and 4 stars in the 25, 26, and 27 class. And I do think it'll be the most talented group of players in a recruiting section sitting and watching a game at Texas I've covered.
That's crazy.
I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. That was a great update, Jerry. Tremendous. Hey, I know, Blake, you have one more thing you want to get to. We have Brian Robison coming up. We also have Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports coming up. Talk a little news that happened last week around the conferences and the national letter of intent as well as what's replacing it. But first, we want to say thank you to our sponsor. That is MyBookie. With all the excitement of this season, make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTexas to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors. Bet big and bet confidently with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you get all your money back. Weekly no-sweat win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using my OnTexas code to cash in on a double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you even place your first bet. But do not wait on it because it's only available for a limited time. For those of you who've been playing with MyBookie, they've got something for you too. A brand new loyalty rewards program in MyBookie Plus. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn. And as you progress through the tiers, unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your account. On Texas football, brought to you by the folks at MyBookie. Thank you very much, MyBookie.
I wanted to bring this up real quick, Blake. Chuck Mason, how many NFL scouts? I would bet every team has a personnel representative or scout at this game Saturday, Bobby. You wrote something on OnTexasFootball.com. We have a lot more recruiting information on OnTexasFootball.com as well. We're having discussions about all of it over on the site. You come jump in. But if every NFL team's not represented Saturday, I'd be shocked.
Jerry, you and I went over the numbers. 70, we think, is the number, maybe a little bit more, of number of future NFL players on both sides of the squad. So basically, combine Texas and Georgia together, and there are likely 70 future players or more who will make an NFL roster. That's ridiculous. That's a number that. That's kind of freaky. I don't know what else to say other than that. Blake, what did you have for us before Brian comes on here in a little bit?
Yeah, so we got one more clip, guys, here from Kirby Smart. If you give me just a second, I'm going to cue this up, and here we go.
Where they're balanced, and they do a great job of putting you in conflict in terms of run, pass, play action, turn your back to the ball. I mean, they can take shots. They got really good wideouts to take shots with. I think they lost a couple backs, maybe at preseason camp, and I thought like, okay, well, they're not going to have. Well, these two backs they got are really good, and I'm like, man, I'm watching them against Mississippi State, who I'd seen them against. Last week while we were watching Mississippi State, I was really impressed, and then against Oklahoma, they even got better. So there's not like there's these weaknesses. They're big, physical up front on defense and offense. They're built around the offensive and defensive lines, and that when you look at his record. And you say, look at his record while he's been there. Every year it's improved. Well, the trenches improved every year. And they're for real in the trenches. They've got good players, and they're built like an SEC team. And it's hard to prepare for him because he knows what he's doing. Offensively, he's really different in terms of what he makes you adjust to.
And it's time to add on to this. Offensive line game for Texas. One interesting thing about Georgia, and it's the same. It was the offensive line plays at a high level against Michigan. Texas is going to have guys open, and Quinn has time to get on the ball. Same thing against Oklahoma. In Georgia, for the people that may have not watched Georgia much this season, because everybody can't see every game, right? We can't either. I think if people are thinking of Georgia 2021, 2022 defensively, that's not what this Georgia team is. They don't have 4 first-round picks on the defensive line that are just suffocate you and you walk out the door with 170 yards like Kentucky did a couple of times, just like, golly, just get us on the bus. I'm ready to go home. They don't have that type of defense where they can just suffocate you anymore. They actually have some secondary issues. They're not – what'll be interesting is if they move Jalen Walker around in this game early, that's going to be telling to me that Georgia doesn't think they can get pressure with their normal looks because Jalen Walker's been playing middle backer. If they move him outside – and say, all right, this is your game, you got to go get it, then that means they don't think they can beat the Texas front without moving him out from inside backer to the off the edge. That's going to be something to watch. This week, they're going to be working on secondary because they had some bust and they got beat deep too much last week for a Georgia team against Mississippi State. I think we have the superstar. It's time for superstar.
Think so. Go ahead and make the introduction.
I want one time Brian to come on the show with a discus in his hand.
I got him at the house.
Got him. I know you do. You still throw. When's the last time you threw a disc? When's the last time you just threw?
I can't even remember, man. Honestly, I can't. Probably 2012-ish, maybe. I don't know, something like that.
We're gonna make this a lot. We're gonna do a live shot with Brian throwing a discus soon.
For charity. We'll create a charity for you, Brian, and do it around that. Hey, dude.
There you go. We'll just get me.
Lost him there for a second, Brian.
Lost you a little bit, Brian.
We'll bring him back in a second when he gets going. I think he may be back now. Do we have him again, Brian? Let's bring him back in. Yeah, I got you. What did you say? Get you and who together?
We'll get me and Krauser together, and we'll just see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, he might beat you by about 30 feet, right? How far?
No, 35 at least.
35 at least. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us. You were on the post-game show. We talked a little Oklahoma. We're going to talk Oklahoma briefly, but really looking forward to Georgia right now. Your final thoughts on what you saw in the Cotton Bowl on Saturday.
Man, listen, I my final thoughts on that game are Texas can win in a plethora of ways. You see an offense that started off, I think everybody was super excited to get Quinn back. Everybody expected them to just light it up. It didn't happen. And guess what? They hung their hat on the running game, and they ended up just literally dominating a top 10 defense in the country. I mean, if you really want to look at it, that's a top 10 defense in the country that they had just absolutely dominated in the run game. And Quinn got comfortable. That's the major deal, is he got comfortable as the game went on. You're going to look at his stats. You're going to see the 199 yards. And your first thought process is, well, the passing game wasn't there. It was there. Quinn was a little rusty, but at the end of the day, he got comfortable, and that's what you need going into a game like this is your quarterback being comfortable.
You talk about winning in a variety of ways. The defense clearly stepped up, but that offense from Oklahoma was surely anemic. This Georgia offense is not anemic. And I've got to ask you, Brian, you've been a lot of big football games in your life, none bigger than Texas USC national championship game. Two heavyweights are really coming together on Saturday in Austin. What does it take for a team to come out on top in a game where, those other guys are just as talented as you? And what is it that the winning team has that the losing team necessarily doesn't?
Well, I think a lot of times it just comes down to who wants it more. When you start getting evenly matched teams like this, it becomes a man versus man spectacle. And I say that because you don't want to play as an individual, but you have to win your individual battles. And when you line up across a guy, anytime I would line up across a tight end or a tackle, I had to want it more than he did, because at a program like Georgia and a program like Texas that are very similar programs as far as where they are right now, Georgia has been at the top. They understand what it takes. Texas has not. Let's be honest. Texas has not been at the top in quite some time. Last year, they made huge strides to get to where they were. And I think now they understand the culture. They understand what it takes to stay there. But they haven't experienced this on a day in, day out basis like the Georgia players have. So they understand it a little bit more. They're going to have a little bit more moxie when it comes to that, right? They're going to understand that they have to win their individual battles. They're going to understand what it takes in order to stay on top, how hard it is to stay on top. Texas doesn't understand that yet, but Texas, man, here's the deal that I think sets Texas apart from everybody else in the country right now. And I say this reluctantly because this is the biggest game that they're going to play this year up to this point. So they really haven't had that huge test per se. But Texas understands how to put games away. They don't necessarily have to start fast, but the in-game adjustments that I've seen from Sarkisian and his staff, the understanding and the abilities of the players has been a testament to the coaches. And what I mean by that is last week, you look at last week, I thought the defense showed a lot of looks last week that even I, looking at it from a TV perspective, was like, oh, they're blitzing. Anthony Hill's going to spy. They're blitzing everybody. And then next thing you know, they're dropping Anthony Hill into coverage. And then next play, it's the same look, but now Anthony Hill's coming. And then it's another look and he's spying. I thought they did a really good job, and I think they're going to have to do that with Carson Beck this week in order to be successful.
I got to ask you, Brian, their passing game and run game, they can beat you one of two ways. Georgia really can, puts a lot of pressure on the safeties to come up and support the run game, or they'll get beat over the top because Georgia has a pair of wide receivers that run 500 meters. I mean, they've got some dudes that can run just like Texas. So my question to you is, how important or what will be the most important piece on the Texas defense this week? Is it pass rush, the edges really making Carson Beck speed up his timeline? Will it be stopping the run first and foremost? What do you see as the priority for Texas on defense?
Well, I think when I look at this Georgia offense, they're leaning very heavily on the pass, and some of that is because they've been in ball games late. You look at almost every game that they've been in this year, they've been in ball games late. They've had to make plays in the passing game. You're going to look at the run game and you're going to see the stats and you're going to think that it's not necessarily there this year. It's not that. It's just they've leaned more heavily on the passing game in order to win football games. And I think one, you have to stop the run game. It's Georgia. You got to out physical them up front, and you got to send a message, right? They're going to try to come into Austin. They're going to try to be physical. They're going to try to show you this is the SEC. You hadn't seen nothing yet type attitude. You outfit. I think at that point, it becomes the DBs. I really believe it comes down to the DBs this week. We lost Derek Williams in the secondary, so they're going to try to test our secondary. They're going to try to see our depth. And Carson Beck feels good about that. I mean, you look at the Alabama game, that's really how they were able to come back in that game. They got the passing game going. They were able to hit the deep shots, and then also some of the underneath routes. So they can beat you in a plethora of ways. Like you said, they got some speedy wide receivers that they have no problem, just like Texas, getting the ball to them underneath and letting them make plays with their legs. Yards after catch is going to be a huge deal this year. Texas has done an extremely good job of coming downhill and tackling wide receivers and not letting them get the yak yardage. So I think the DBs is going to be a very big key this week.
Hey, Brian, I wanted to ask you about Bobby said you played in some big games. So I want to ask you about home field, right? I mean, how big do you actually think that is? I mean, because obviously DKR may be rocking like it hadn't been in, 2 decades Saturday night. I mean, this is a massive, massive game. It's a night game. It's going to be unbelievable. But how important for you, having been on the road in these games, how much more difficult is it? And how much does it play into the game itself, in your opinion?
Well, I think these games come down to momentum. I really believe that. And what I mean by that is when you're talking home field advantage, if the momentum is on the home field side, it's very hard to play in a home stadium. And you're talking about DKR that's going to have 100 plus. You saw it the last 2 years, one with Alabama and then, Kansas State last year. Even though Kansas State was in a ball game, I really think the crowd got in it late in the game and it kind of shook the Kansas State offense, especially, late in the game and into the overtime. But the Alabama game to me is a game that I look at and I'm like, Texas really wasn't on the level of that Alabama football team. But they were able to stay in it because they had momentum. They had the crowd in it the whole time. You look at Ohio State, when I played at Ohio State in 2005. Dude, that was a hard game to play. And I'm playing defense. But for our offense, that stadium got loud because they were in it. If you can go into a game and you can take a home field stadium out of the game, get them quiet, get them frustrated, whatever you got to do, it makes it a lot easier. But if you let the home team stay in it, you let their momentum on that side, good luck, because your offense is going to have a rough day.
Yeah. I think that home field is, when I went to school, home field was not always a home field for the Longhorns back in the early 90s. Yep. I'll be honest, it changed a little bit when Texas played Houston. Then Mac came along and did a great job of getting fan participation back up, and Texas has kept that going right now. And Chris Del Conte, he deserves a little bit of credit for making that the atmosphere it is. But really, the players on the field and what they do is what drives that crowd. It is a huge momentum piece to it. Brian, you look at it today. I've got to ask you about the Texas pass rush, because you mentioned the DBs. I think that the Georgia offensive line they're tremendous run blockers. I question whether or not they're tremendous pass blockers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you're thinking about the Texas pass rush right now and what you think they might be able to do against Georgia?
Yeah, I do think that Texas pass rush can have success against Georgia. I think when you look at Georgia, I do agree with you. I think they're better run blockers, but that's kind of the point with Georgia. If they can get the ball going, it allows themselves to kind of have that little bit of room for error per se, right? So if they can get the run game going, it slows down the defensive line. Therefore, it kind of gets them a little bit slower off the ball. Colin Simmons, let's talk about him. If they can run the ball at him and they can get him to slow his pass rush down a little bit, it gives that offensive lineman that split second that he may need to catch up with him off the ball, get in front of him, and kind of make it a tough decision for the Texas defensive pass rush. That's why I said the DBs are going to be so important, because if they can just get Carson Beck to go through his reads, not be able to hit his first read, but even get just to his second read and maybe third read, I think this Texas pass rush is going to have an opportunity to get there. So that's why I think the DBs are going to be very important. I said it a few weeks ago, nobody should be worried about this Texas pass rush. Sacks come in bunches. It's starting to happen, and hopefully it continues this week.
Fingers
by
crossed.
by the way, to that point, Texas is now on pace for 42 sacks this season. And it happened in 2 weeks.
Yep.
It's good stuff. Brian, thank you so much, buddy. You have a good one. I'll see you on Saturday on the post game show.
Yes, sir. We'll see you there.
All right, hook 'em, buddy.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Hook 'em.
Good. Brian down in Belleville, Texas, right now, I believe, taking his kid to school this morning. Good guy, no doubt about it. True Longhorn through and through, Jerry. Longtime NFL player, just a really quality dude. By the way, you know what? I think he was an academic All-American as well. By the way, just another feather in his cap, or academic All-Conference or something. I can't remember.
By the way, I want to bring up a comment from a Georgia fan, because I like it when the other fans come in and this guy, we don't want to talk about this game with all you guys. We're missing 69 on the OL. Look, that's what I'm interested in Georgia. That's why I kind of watched Kirby's press conference yesterday. I was going to see, obviously Ratledge is out. I think he's supposed to be out until the Florida game. He had the ankle tightrope surgery is what they call it. And he's back and moving, but not expected to play this month currently. Then Jared Wilson at center, who was playing really well, a guy that Georgia was really high on. He's missed the last 2 games. Mike Bobo's son, Drew Bobo's, filled in admirably for him. But that center guard, they aren't as healthy as they were, obviously, at the start of the season. And missing center and your All-American right guard, you don't replace All-Americans. No different if Kelvin Banks went down. You don't replace All-Americans. So they've had to shuffle on that offensive line. We'll see if I expect Wilson to play the center against Texas this week. We'll see what that does for the Georgia run game and communication, because communication is going to be huge for Georgia on the road Saturday. Huge, massive pre-snap.
All right, Bobby, before we move on, I'm going to let you tell folks out there about one of our newest sponsors, one I know you're excited about.
Yeah, I really do. Happy to welcome a new sponsor to On Texas Football, Tecovas. Texans know that anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots. Tecovas are handcrafted with every stitch on point. Tecovas boots are made for a good time and a long time. And yes, somebody asked yesterday, were they the boots that Big Tex was wearing on Saturday? Yes, they were. I love the fact that they're already broken in for comfort right out of the box. That's a big one for me. I don't have time to wear my boots enough to get them comfortable. And Tecovas makes it easy for anyone to find their favorite boot with all kinds of sizes and styles. Tecovas are simply the best boot around. I really like that you can either be daily boots or you can feel dressed up with them. Right now, get 10% off at tecovas.com/Texas football when you sign up for email and text. That's 10% off at tecovas.com/Texas football. With Tecovas Best in the West guarantee, you also get free returns and exchanges for 30 days. So try them out. Tecovas.com/Texas football. See site for details. Tecovas, point your toes west.
Hey, by the way, if Texas beats Georgia, Bobby will race Brandon Huey in a pair of Tecovas. I know Brandon's always got his boots on.
Like Brandon could beat. I think Brandon might be able to beat me running backwards.
We're going to find out.
He and his son both.
All right, guys. One other thing we need to talk about before we get to questions and super chats is a little basketball, because some polls came out. Texas men's basketball, number 19 in the AP preseason poll. And then don't have the AP poll yet for the women, but they're number 2 in the preseason media rankings for the SEC. So big honor for both.
Yeah, I got to tell you real quick on that. Men's, watched them practice 2 weeks ago. Much more talented roster. They just got to pull it together. Guys got to be accepting of roles. People are going to have to defer the ball to a stud freshman, Trey Johnson. Caden Shedder, a lot different player this year, healthy, confident. Guards are much bigger. Tremont Mark, Trey Johnson, both 6'5", 6'6". They got a lot of size at guard. I think Julian Larry's really good point guard for this team. Jordan Pope can really shoot it. Arthur Kaluma's got to buy into a role. Jason Kent's a really good role player. Kendall Weaver's improved. Pound for pound, he may be as good an athlete as there is on the 40 in some ways, especially vertically explosive. But he's going to test off the charts when it comes to combine testing in the future. But Texas men's got a chance. They open November 5th. What did the 19th ranking in the AP poll get you? 7th in the SEC. So for people that think, move from the Big 12 to the SEC, basketball is easier, not at the top. It's actually more difficult this year. I know Kansas is ranked 1, but if you go look at Ken Palm, all the rankings, and I agree with them, the SEC top half of the league is unbelievably good this year. Women ranked 2. You know what's key about that? Vic Schaefer's waving down at Kim Mulkey because they're 3.
I love it, dude. You never know, man. You never know who's going to do it. Jerry, I want to ask you one thing about basketball. Is there a comparison, a comp you have for this Texas team and from a previous Texas team? And what do you think their ceiling is and what their floor is for this team?
Yeah, I have a hard time with that one yet. I want to see them come together. But as far as a team constructed, you know, and I'm not. Then people say, "Oh, Jerry's saying Texas going to the Final Four." I'm not saying that at all. These guys have to coach the games. Guys have to buy in the roles. They're constructed similar to Miami, the Miami team that beat Texas. Now, Miami didn't have even as much bigs and depth that Texas does. With a Shedrick, with a Kaluma, with Jason Kent. I mean, Miami pretty much played with Normato Cheer, one guy, but they were very big guard oriented. They played 4 guards a lot of time. Texas is going to play 3 guards, and they're going to be bigger, and they're going to be able to go to a bigger lineup with 4 guards at times and with certain matchups. So that's who they're kind of going to look like a little bit to me, but they got to also play at that pace. But the biggest thing is they have to play together. Guys have to be accepting of roles. I mean, when Jabari Rice came into Texas and said, "I'll be the 6th man, that's fine, but you know what? You want me on the court at the end of the game." Who's going to do that on this team? Because you have 5 guys that have averaged double figures last year in college basketball. I mean, Jordan Pope was the 4th leading scorer in the Pac-12. Tremont Mark was 16.5 at Arkansas. But you have Trey Johnson, a freshman, coming in that's going to be a projected lottery pick by a lot of people. And I've seen him. He's unbelievably talented and tough. So who's going to defer the ball to a freshman at times? Those things have to be worked out. If they work it all out and they maximize what they have, they definitely can be a second weekend team.
Good stuff. All right, guys, we got some super chats we need to read here. This first one from Dan. Dan, thank you. He says, "Good morning from Niedersachsen. Great game and money for the boys of OTF."
Thanks, Dan. We appreciate it. I don't know where Niedersachsen is. That in Germany? Is that Germany?
Germany.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Never been to Niedersachsen, though. Got to admit. At least I don't think I have been.
And then Jerry's Jacks Links, thank you as always. He says, "Crazy to think our best football has yet to be played. Maybe Michigan was the best so far, but I still think that we have more."
Look, if Texas turns in a Michigan level offensive performance Saturday, then Georgia's going to have to play really well.
I agree. I think whoever's I really do believe this is going to come down to whose quarterback really plays the best, because they're going to I feel like the quarterbacks are going to have to step up. Now, maybe it gets to be a muddled game, Jerry, but I feel like both teams have a chance to score in the 30s, and whichever quarterback really dials it in, particularly in the second half, going to have a real big time coming out of there. Hey, I got to say this about Dan and from Niedersachsen. I think it's really cool that every morning we get on here and we see guys not just from, Austin or Dallas or Houston. Those are great. I mean, don't get me wrong. Love all those cities, but around the country and around the world, man. That's fun. Hope you're having he's saying good morning. It's got to be afternoon over there for him right now, if you think about it. So thanks, Dan. We do appreciate it. And we love seeing everybody around the country. Longhorn Nation's worldwide.
Yeah, it's 3:53 p.m. over there.
There we go.
There you go. Longhorn Frenzy 1 says, "What are some of the individual battles that we should be looking for on the offensive and defensive lines?" And thank you for the super chat.
Well, Mikael Williams is not healthy for Georgia. And before the season, I was looking for, and now he's been a projected first-round guy that hadn't been the productive first-round guy. But I was looking forward to seeing him against Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, those guys. For me right now, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Georgia does defensively against Gunnar Helm. I'll tell you the other thing is for the Georgia offensive line. And now, again, I was looking forward to Tate Ratledge and Jared Wilson working against the interior of the Texas defensive line. We're not going to have that. So now what's it going to look like? The Georgia offensive tackles versus Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill. To Bobby's point.
Yeah.
Look, I think you can look at this game. Texas hasn't played an offense like Georgia this year, anything close to it, by the way, not even close. To a quarterback, they'll be an NFL draft pick, receivers, tight ends, linemen, running backs, all of it. Georgia hasn't played as talented of an offensive line as Texas, and they haven't got home a lot. So something's going to have to give in this game for me, and I really think Kirby's obviously challenging his secondary this week because they have not played up to the standard, but they also lost a bunch to the NFL. Malachi Starks is a great player, but the corners, they've taken a step back so far. Maybe they play their best game of the season Saturday, but they haven't to this point. But Georgia's front against Texas offensive line is one I'm really looking forward to, because if Georgia struggles to get pressure on Quinn with their front, they don't have the secondary they've had in years past.
I will say this. The matchups in particular I'm looking forward to, and I wrote about it today on Texas football, Jerry, from an NFL draft standpoint. Can Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams hold up in pass pro and move people in the run game? If they can, they will only go up with their draft stock. Period. Right. End of story. Because if you can do it against Georgia, the prevailing thought in NFL circles is if you can do it against Georgia, you can do it against anybody, right? You're on that level.
Yep.
This offensive line has to take that as the Joe Moore award-winning game, because it's not just those two. It's going to be Jake Majors. Frankly, and Jerry, you know this as well as I do, the Big 12 doesn't have as big a guys as the SEC. We're now getting into the back half of the schedule where Jake Majors is going to be seeing SEC level defensive tackles the whole time. This is what he would see in the NFL, right? Yep. He's going to be tested that way. He is not a big guy as a center. He's big enough, in my opinion, but that's going to be tested. Then you have the guards, Hayden Connor. Is he going to get pushed around? Hayden's plenty good in pass protection. Is he going to get pushed around in the run game, though? What about DJ Campbell? Is he going to get olayed a little bit in pass protection? Going to be fine in the run game, in my opinion. So I think it's not any one-on-one matchup that I'm looking forward to. It's just not. I'm looking forward to the whole thing, because I think that's, you give Quinn Ewers enough time to play and throw the ball, he's going to eat you up. I mean, he just will. He's not going to have a game like he had against he's not going to have another game like he had against Oklahoma. That literally was his worst game in 2 years, in my opinion. And even Brian Robison said, yeah, but he settled down.
Yeah.
And they found a way to start getting him involved. And I literally believe this. That run that Steve Sarkisian had Quinn Ewers do on the goal line, where he actually kept the ball on a goal line run, I think that was purposeful.
I do too. 100%.
I think he wanted Quinn Ewers to get hit a little bit, to mix it up and show it to other teams in the future that, look, he's not going to play soft. Now, Quinn may have looked soft in that first quarter, like he didn't want to get hit, etc. But I think there's a lot of battles that will determine not only the outcome of the game, but also where these guys go in the draft. I mean, you're either good enough or you're not, Gunnar Helm. I'll give you an example. Jerry, you mentioned him. Can you actually block some of these defensive ends and linebackers from Georgia effectively? If you can, your draft stock goes up. Point blank, because you've shown you can catch the ball. You're a plus receiver, period. Okay, Gunnar, let's see how you fight in the run game this week. So a lot of those things going on. Again, the prevailing thought, if you can do it against Georgia, you can do it against anyone.
No question. Primetime dog. I love the Georgia comments. Running QBs give UGA the most trouble. Pocket passers are easier for us to defend. I agree for everybody in college football, though. I will say this. I think that's for everybody, and that's why I think offensive line play is going to be massive for both teams Saturday night, because whose offensive line gives their pocket passer time to throw the ball in the intermediate and down the field? Because I think whoever does, both teams will make plays. Which offensive line holds up? I hate to put it on one position, and I'm not. But if you ask me the most important position for both teams Saturday, it's offensive line. In this game, it's not always, but it is in this game.
I will agree with that, and I would add defensive ends getting pressure.
Yeah.
Against that offensive line. So it's that matchup, to your point, Jerry.
As we got a super chat here from Cody Masters. He says, any concern on the red zone offense? They were 4 of 6 versus Oklahoma.
Yes. They reverted against a better defense, and that was one of the things we were concerned about. So, yeah, of course there's concern. I don't know if it's overwhelming concern yet, though. And like I said, I do think that making teams respect Quinn Ewers on that keep was a case in point of Sark trying to make teams stay honest on the goal line and in short yardage.
All right, guys. Before we move on, we need to tell folks out there about a couple of our sponsors, and we're going to start with Factor. Jerry?
Yes, absolutely. Sweater weather pairs perfectly with savory fall foods. But with your busy schedule, sometimes it's hard to eat the way you'd like to. Boy, don't I know that. That's where Factor comes in. More Factor, the better for me. Their chefs do the shopping and chopping to bring you the fresh, never frozen, fully cooked meals right to your doorstep. All you have to do is heat and eat. When it comes to meals, everyone wants the same thing. Options, options, options. That's why Factor offers 35 wholesome meals every week. So you'll always find something you love that suits your lifestyle. Of course, there's more to Factor than just lunches and dinners. From easy breakfasts, and smoothies to those midnight snacks that you try to hide from your spouse. Factor has over 60 plus add-ons to keep you fueled and focused 24/7. And with a ton of flavors, you'll never get bored. That's important. I promise you, once you try it, you'll be hooked. Head to factormeals.com/Texas50. Use code Texas50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. Golly, I'll lose 20 pounds. That code Texas50 at factormeals.com/Texas50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Who doesn't need that? That sounds great. I'm in.
And then, Bobby, if you'll let everyone know about BetterHelp.
Yeah, this episode of On Texas Football brought to you by the folks at BetterHelp. There are a lot of helpful apps out there, but it would be difficult for any of them to be more useful than BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp is an app that helps those in need to find the help they deserve. Maybe you're having personal issues that you just can't figure out. Maybe you've experienced major trauma in the past or recently lost a loved one. Maybe you get caught up comparing yourself to someone else. Whatever the case may be, if you're considering beginning therapy as an option, you'll want to check out BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So no matter what your own previous experience with therapy may be, check out BetterHelp.com today. Overcome your fears, with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/OnTexas today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/OnTexas. Again, reach out to them if you're having any issues. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp.
Thank you, Bobby. And we're going to move on to some more super chats, guys. This one from JS. We appreciate it, JS. He says, is Johntay Cook okay? He's getting hardly any catches or playing time. Everyone said he would be huge this year, including the Texas players that made the NFL. Are others just doing better in practice?
Not so sure about practice, but, and I mentioned this yesterday. He his playing time was reduced against OU. He played 4 plays against OU. You're wondering right now whether or not the circle of receiver trust is tightening. And also, that came he only got 4 plays. It came at a time when Isaiah Bond was out of the game. So Texas went more with Silas Bolden, who can say he doesn't deserve more time after what he did, right? They went more with DeAndre Moore. Matthew Golden, I think, played the most snaps out of any receiver on the roster. And then how do you take Ryan Wingo off the field with his explosiveness? I think it's not anything about playing. Right now, and this is the other thing, Amari Niblack is somewhat similarly situated to Johntay Cook. Plenty good as a player, but who are you going to take off the field right now? I mean, who are you going to take off the field?
Yeah, it's just competition. And here's what happens.
And it's a meritocracy.
Yeah, and here's what happens. Now, guys are on different developmental paths. You got to stick with it. You got to have some resiliency for some of these guys right now. And that's part of being in a big-time program is the adversity hits in different ways. And what are you going to do to go maximize it? And some guys have to find a role. DeAndre Moore did a great job identifying Jordan Whittington and saying, I can do that. And that needs to be where I maximize my ability at Texas. Sometimes you have to find that role and you have to go find your niche, whatever, and you have to go maximize that. I think that's where some of these guys are at Texas right now that aren't seeing as much playing time as they wanted. But there's going to be opportunity if you stick with it. Why do you think Ryan Niblett's been rewarded by Steve Sarkisian? 80% of kids would have walked out the door after last spring. 80% they would have hit the portal. He didn't. So his development continues at Texas. He shows resiliency, and the coaches really respect that. That's a big. Hey, corn dog with mayo. I got to bring this up. Sorry, Jerry, I trademarked corn dog with mayo. Dad gummit. That's all I got to say. Dad gummit.
Oh, man. All right, guys. Our next one comes from Tub in Texas. And he says, just think about how far this program has come since the plane ride back from Iowa State in 2021. Once Sark got his players in, everything changed.
Man, I completely agree. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, how bad was that loss at Iowa State? Texas looked helpless in the second half. I mean, not any good on defense, not any good on offense. I was like, what the hell is going to happen here? You know? I agree. I wish I could sit here and tell you I had all the answers, but there's been so many things that have happened in a positive way. I mean, Jerry, maybe there's been a recruiting loss or two in the last couple of years that sting, but overall, just the trajectory of the program has been on a steady incline, and I'm not sure it's stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, usually there are bumps in the road that are pretty significant. I'm not sure Texas has had a significant bump in the road since that game. Yeah. I really don't. I mean, it may be and you know what? I will say this. That game against Kansas State late in that 5-7 year, where Roshan kind of just took over and said, jump on my back. That may have been the time they said, okay, look, we got some players here and we need to lean on them. And I agree, but it's usually one step forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, a step back. It's been the steady incline, Tub, in Texas that I think has been most impressive because it just doesn't normally work like that.
Yeah. And I always go back to something you see in recruiting because we got a guest coming up that's more important than I. One thing that you showed where Sark was going to go with the program in recruiting is a 2022 class. Calvin Banks committed to Oregon. Cam Williams committed to Oregon. DJ Campbell's process was going to continue on. Texas didn't go down there to a B list of offensive linemen. They knew the guys they've had to get to turn the thing around and compete on the level of the Alabama, Michigan, Georgia. Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, DJ Campbell, that group of offensive linemen changed this program, but it also kind of was a foreshadow to how Sark was going to recruit at Texas.
All right, Bobby, I'm going to let you intro our next guest.
Yeah. I would love to welcome in Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports. How you doing this morning, Ross?
Good, Bobby. How are you?
Good, man. Thank you for joining us here at On Texas Football, Coffee and Football. Ross, for those who don't know, is the national reporter for Yahoo Sports and just a tremendous wealth of information. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should, in my opinion, as well as Yahoo Sports. He does a tremendous job following, I don't want to call it the business of college sports, but that's kind of something, it's what it's become, right? Whether it's NLI, you had a big story on National Letter of Intent last week. You followed the conference realignment and the future of college football playoffs. Ross is an expert in all this. I met him down at the SEC Media Day spring meetings, and he was breaking news while we were down there, and I ran into him and said, man, I've got to get you on the show. And we ended up having him on for a 15-minute segment one time, and I just thought you were so good, Ross. We appreciate you joining us again this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be on. And yeah, it's fair to call it the I think the business of college sports. That's what it is. It is now in general is a business as we know.
Yeah, it's evolved into it almost. Look, they had meetings in Nashville last week that you were covering. They announced some new rules. What are the big things right now with the college football playoff and the Big Ten and SEC commissioners getting together? What are the 2 or 3 things that you're tracking as a result of that? Like, what are the things that you're now thinking the future might look like?
Yeah, I think there were probably 3 main topics that the SEC ADs and Big Ten ADs discussed last week in Nashville. I think one of them is a kind of a scheduling partnership, regular season scheduling partnership in football that they plan to do with one another. I would guess that eventually that will happen, that will get done. The SEC and Big Ten teams will play at least one another once in a non-conference game, every year. I think the second thing they discussed was the future of the college football playoff format. The SEC and Big Ten, based on their belief of the way the CFP agreement they sign in the spring reads, is that they basically control the format. They control the future format. Now, there's some guarantees already built in, like at least 5, the highest ranked 5 conference champions will get in. And then there's some guarantees around Notre Dame as an independent will get in. But outside of a lot of the other things, they control it. And I'm talking about multiple automatic qualifiers for conferences, which is the Big Ten had pushed in a proposal last spring. And I think that was discussed again in Nashville at the meeting, is what that's going to look like. And then I think lastly, they discussed the House case in the post-House settlement type of world, what it looks like, the enforcement models, all that stuff, and that gets really complicated. But Bobby, what it boils down to is, and I wrote this last week from Nashville, is the SEC and Big Ten want a multiple guaranteed playoff spots, number one. And number two, that's because they want to play tougher regular season schedules, potentially against each other, for more money, to generate more money. And in order to play tougher regular seasons, they feel like they need automatic spots, because if you play tougher regular season, the odds are you're going to lose more games, right? So they don't want to get left out of the playoff. And so it's kind of a tree. They need the AQs to get to the second thing, which is a scheduling partnership and tougher regular season, bigger matchups, to get to the third thing, which is generating more money, to get to the fourth thing, which is now, in the House case, sharing that revenue with athletes.
Would that drive up if they do that? So if you start bringing in more money, right, would more money necessarily go to the student athletes, or is that a cap?
Great question. Yes, more money would go to the student athletes so the way it works is they, to reach the cap, every year schools under the House settlement starting next July, if it's approved, and it should be approved. It was preliminary approved last week, but it should be finally approved in April. I would expect, especially after the way it was preliminary approved. So it should be approved. And so starting next July, every school will share revenue with athletes up to a cap, as you mentioned. And the cap is determined in a kind of a complicated formula. But the easiest way to say it is they took all of the Power Conference athletic budgets, they combined them all with certain revenues. So the main ones are media, the TV money, the sponsorship money, and I'm missing one, ticket sales. So those are the three big revenue factors for any athletic department. They took all of the Power Conference athletic departments, those three revenue streams, they took it all, they got a number, and they divide that number by 22%. That 22% of that number is how much athletes will get. That's the cap of the 22% of that number. So if you do scheduling arrangements, that will probably necessitate there's more ticket sales, right? That will probably bring you more TV money and potentially more sponsorship money as well. So all of the revenue streams included in that 22 into that cap are involved in this. So yes, in a way, players get 22% of all of this new money in these revenue streams, basically.
But that would be nationally, not on a conference by conference basis, right? Because it's a national. So even if the SEC and Big Ten generate more money, that's going to force a ACC team to potentially pay more money to its student athletes to keep up. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's right. That's right. And that's a even I didn't think about that, Bobby. That's pretty good. Look at you. Because you're right. Because if revenues increase in the SEC and Big Ten, it inflates the overall number for everybody.
Right.
And that's a good point. Yeah, and that is very right. That is very accurate. It's funny, during negotiations for the House settlement, there was a thought from many that this should be a conference by conference number. Each conference should have their own number, right? Which the cap would be a lot lower in the Big 12 and ACC than it is in the SEC and Big 10. In the end, they decided, no, we have to do a national number for competitive reasons, and that's where we are.
That's good stuff. Ross, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, Ross, I was going to ask you about obviously national letter of intent going away was big news in the college football world and recruiting world. What were your main takeaways from that, and kind of where do you see this all headed with that? I guess from the 30,000 foot view, I don't know if anybody knows the answers, but where do you see it all headed right now?
Yeah, I know that created a bigger news than I expected.
Yes.
I know the national letter of intent is something that's been around forever that players have signed, and it's important. I get that, especially in the recruiting world. But it had gotten where I don't know that it was as important for those in the industry, if it really mattered that much. And I think what we'll see when we move on to the House settlement and revenue sharing is I think what we'll see is players are going to sign NIL agreements with their schools for revenue sharing. And those are going to be, somewhat binding NIL agreements. That's still a little up in the air of what kind of parameters in securities and that will be in this agreement. But they're going to sign these different agreements. So there was always going to have to be some kind of change going into a revenue sharing kind of world. Is you're going to have these new agreements where athletes will be able to get revenue directly from their schools and have to sign these new things. So it just kind of gets replaced by financial aid, NIL agreements with their schools. So I don't, in the end, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But certainly it's the end of an era, and it's the end of an era. It also is the end of confusion You have NIL and you also have NLI. So now we're getting rid of the NLI.
Hey, Ross, we know you got to get going and stuff. There's a lot of spin-off questions I have for you. Like, this 22%, is that across all athletic programs and not just football, for example? Is it have to do anything with title? It is. And so how does Title IX play into that? And how are teams going to do? There's so many more questions. We need to have you on again, but I know you're up against it, and we appreciate you coming on, and keep up the good work, man. I follow you religiously on Twitter, or X now, excuse me. I follow you religiously on that. Keep up the good work, and we really appreciate you, bud.
Yeah. Let me know whenever you want me to come back on. I appreciate being on.
I got a question. You got a pick for Georgia Texas game Saturday? What are you thinking?
Oh yeah. Well, the way they played lately, certainly Texas, I think, and I'll actually be there in Austin coming in on Thursday, so I'm excited about that one. Waited to the last minute to book anything, so that's been fun to try to get somewhere to stay. But I got lucky with a little Airbnb. But I'll be there. I'm excited about the atmosphere there. I've never been to Texas for a night kickoff. It's always ended up being during the day, so I'm excited to see the prime time there.
Hopefully, you won't sweat as much at night, Ross.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, man. Thanks for joining us. That's Ross Dellenger.
Yep.
On Ross from Yahoo Sports national writer for us. That was good stuff, guys, because I think we wanted to get to the bottom of that. There's so many more questions I could have sat there and pinged him on because there is just a lot of moving pieces. Chris Del Conte in the Texas Athletic Department right now this got a lot of things going on. I'm also interested to see how NIL continues on, and how can universities participate in that, because Texas right now is growing its NIL infrastructure and improving it such that they're going to be able to really capitalize on this momentum that Texas has got on the field. And so I want to see if that's going to be allowed to be able to go on, because you know what? I mean, it's worth more to be a player at Texas than it is at Baylor. Yeah, that's just real. And so now you're trying to make everybody even. Well, there's a reason the Yankees, spend more than, the Kansas City Royals. It doesn't make them a better team necessarily, but you get a little extra if you play in New York. You should get a little extra if you play at Texas. It's a fishbowl,
Definitely.
People are asking about real Victor Aldridge. Do we have a real shot at Justice Terry from Manchester coming in this weekend? He's never been to Texas before. This will be his first visit to Texas, so we'll have to see. I mean, the visit will say a lot. Right now, you come into this visit, you're behind. You're behind Georgia, Alabama, Miami. He's never been on campus before, but we'll see after the visit. I mean, you got to take your swings. You got to take your swings. If Walter Mathis follows through and takes his visit this weekend, it'll be the first time he's ever been on campus. So Texas is getting some guys on campus this weekend that have never been to Texas before, never been to Austin, I should say, before, especially as a football recruit. So you have to see, it's hard to say now for sure because there's so much at play from an NIL perspective with these 5-star recruitments and things such as that. But, look, getting these guys in for an official visit, unofficial visit, these are big because these kids haven't been here before. So you got to take your swings, but it's too early to say how much of a chance does a Texas have. We'll talk about that after the visit.
All right, guys, we got a few super chats before we wrap up here. This first one from AR. He says Texas offensive line handled Michigan and OU's defensive line pretty well. Is Georgia's that much better?
I actually think go ahead, Bobby.
Not as high end as Michigan, but more depth than both of those is how I would say it.
I would say Oklahoma's better pass rush defensive front than Georgia, and Georgia's going to be a better, just bigger against the run. I mean, their guys are Nazir Stackhouse, some of those guys. They're not like Georgia doesn't have 4 first-round picks like they did on 2021. They don't have that. But what they have, and they don't have the Travon Walker, at the 5. They don't have that level guy. They have some big bodies that are going to be mid to late round draft picks that should be really strong against the run and hold the point of attack. If they do their job well, that's going to be their strength. It's not Trevon Walker, Jalen Carter, and those guys right now for Georgia. Even Mikael Williams before the injury, he was a first-round mock draft guy, but he wasn't a first-round production guy to this point in his college career headed in the season. So that's what I'd say the difference. I think Oklahoma gets after the quarterback better naturally with their front. I think Georgia's going to be better against the run.
I still think that Georgia has the most depth on the defensive front of those teams. Like they haven't recruited a defensive lineman that didn't have NFL potential in 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they just, so even their young guys are those kind of guys.
Speaking of Georgia, Bobby, I'm going to drop this link here in the chat for people to check it out. But tell everybody about the upcoming tailgate this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We're expanding from 1/10 to 2/10 for Georgia this weekend. Please feel free to drop by. Duck Camp, one of our sponsors, is going to be doing a few giveaways there. Excited about that and have them on board for that, providing some refreshments. Also, they're giving away a $200 gift certificate as well. And there is, because of the Georgia and the amount of folks expected to come, they are asking for a donation for this tailgate. The folks putting it on, make sure that you check that out. Check out the link for that. I think, I don't know exactly, I think it's $40 a person for the tailgate, but get all the food and drink you want from there at the tailgate. Jerry and I will be there for a little bit. Jerry's going to have to go because there's going to be a lot of recruiting going on early in that. But I'll stick around the tailgate as well as CJ Vogel at times too. So come join us at the tailgate. It's on the LBJ lawn next to the Carpenter building. Blake, that link that you had should have the directions as well as where they can get a wristband, etc.
Yep. And
hey, by the way, Isaac Darden, I agree. They have to get after Quinn because their secondary is not up to the level at corner. I think they're going to have to do it with their linebackers more than their front three guys. I think those front three guys are really good against the run. Again, I'm very interested to see what they do with Jalen Walker in this game because Jalen likes to play in the middle, but off the edge, he's easily their best pass rusher, one of the best in the country. He just doesn't play there very often. I'm really watching what they do with Jalen Walker Saturday.
And then we have two more here regarding Georgia before we get out of here. Victor says, after Texas got up on Oklahoma, I started paying more attention to the Georgia versus Mississippi State game. And I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Texas score for score. I think we'll pull away in the fourth quarter. He would like y'all's thoughts.
So Georgia came back on Alabama by throwing the ball around the yard. Question is whether or not Alabama's defense is any good.
Their secondary has issues.
Yeah, their secondary has issues. That being said, Carson Beck's been labeled a first-round pick, guys. So you're playing the best quarterback you play. You're playing the best group of wide receivers you've played, in my opinion. Good group of tight ends, good group of running backs, good offensive line.
Yeah.
Brian Robison earlier in this episode of Coffee and Football said something that I thought was interesting, and I haven't really thought about it. He said this Texas team is putting teams away. And that's what you're calling for here, Victor. You're saying Texas is going to put Georgia away. I don't know. I mean, Texas they haven't played a team like Georgia yet. That's good on both sides of the ball. Not saying that Georgia's perfect on either side of the ball. Texas isn't perfect on either. But let's see what happens. I'd love to. I hope you're right. I'll put it that way.
All right. And then our last one, guys, comes from Brian. Thank you. Oh, no, we got a couple more now that came in. Thank you, Brian. He says, what's Coffee and Football's biggest concern for the game this week?
Holding up in the run game against the defensive line and linebackers holding up in the run game. They can stop that and make Georgia more one-dimensional. The pass rush will get home. That's the key. If they hold up in the run game, I think Texas has the guys to get the pass rush home.
I will say this. Texas last week against Oklahoma. Interception Oklahoma on the Texas side of the field. Second offensive possession for Oklahoma. Started on their 49 after a face mask. Third one was on their 37. Oklahoma didn't have the offense to take advantage. Georgia does. First quarter cannot go like last week for Texas offensively. If it does, they may be down 2 scores, 10 points, 14 for the first time this season. Can't start that way. No chance.
Strong out of the gate.
Yep. You can't give Georgia the ball on your half of the field at the 50 and then at about the 40, their first 3 possessions. They're going to put – it's not Oklahoma offensively this week.
I want to say this. Texas has been taking the ball instead of deferring the last couple of weeks. That hasn't really worked out. I mean, the final scores worked out. See what if Sark is has that question in front of him this week as well, what he decides to do.
Yep.
And speaking of the offense, Nate Roberts says, Jerry, our offense has scored 32.5 against Michigan and OU's defense, and our defense has only given up 38 all year. Put some respect on our name.
Hey, for sure. But this is like, look, the reality is for me is this Georgia's the first quality offensive team Texas has played. Nobody else is. They hadn't had quarterbacks. The quarterbacks have been replaced off some of those teams. But look, this is the first one, and this is what you want to see. This is what you want to see, and this is what the kids want to see, by the way. But Texas, the one thing I'll say for this game for sure, Texas players are going to be jacked up to play this game. I think even more so than Oklahoma, and I know some of the fans be like, what? Don't say that. And then no way. From a player standpoint, I'm not sure Georgia's not the one. Michigan and Georgia are the ones really circled this year. That's just go back to recruiting where some of these kids who they considered, who's been on top of college football. Texas is going to be totally jacked up for this game. And if Georgia is still the same program that they have been, and I'm not saying they're going anywhere, but I'm saying if they're the same national championship level program, then they're going to deliver their best game of the season Saturday. If they don't, they've taken a small step back for whatever reason.
And our last one for today, fellas, comes from It's 420 somewhere. Thank you for the super chat. Says the biggest difference this year for our defense from years past is what beats them in the first half isn't still beating them in the fourth quarter. PK adjusts and the players respond.
Or they're more like Brian also mentioned this, and I agree with him. Rod has talked about this. Texas is not just one-dimensional anymore. Like last year, we knew Texas could stop the run, and it was whether or not teams could beat them in the passing game. Correct? I mean, is that a fair assessment? This year, you don't know whether Anthony Hill's coming or going, right? You don't know what Colin Simmons is going to do. The defense, the secondary is absolutely better with communication for sure. Rod talks about that all the time, and he's lived it as much as anyone, right? So he knows what he's talking about. I agree. It's not just the adjustments. I think it's just the capacity for what they can do is just totally different. You've gone from a one-trick pony of stopping the run to now, you know what, we can play 5 or 6 defensive backs. By getting Gilbo on the field and putting Barron at corner, I think you put your best 11 out there, and it's paying dividends right now.
Sure. All right, guys. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Coffee and Football, presented by MyBookie. We want to thank them, along with BetterHelp, Factor, and Tecovas for sponsoring today's show. Thank you all for tuning in, the great questions, the super chats, and we've talked about it before, but if you haven't already, go head over to ontexasfootball.com, join the discussion, get in on the community. Lots of great threads and conversation going on over there. Jerry has a lot of recruiting notes, team news between Bobby and CJ and Jerry, and just everything and anything in between. You can use promo code OTFOG. That'll get you a full year for just $39.95. You can't beat that. Again, on TexasFootball.com, promo code OTFOG. And Bobby, before we get out of here, what can folks look forward to today?
We got lunch with the coach. I'm getting ready to talk to Bob Shipley and Brian Irwin in a few minutes. We'll have that up before lunchtime. Jerry and CJ have the recruiting breakdown going later today too, talking about all those guys coming in for the visit for the Georgia game, as well as the live stream later tonight. We've got a full day going. And like Blake said, join us in the community on TexasFootball.com because when we're not talking on here, we're actually on those message boards trying to do our job and answer questions from you guys as well. So please join us if you would. We appreciate each and every one. I'm still tickled that we got somebody from Germany on here this morning.
And Japan and Australia. I saw Japan and Australia after Germany.
That's fun.
Truly are worldwide right here on
Love
Texas Football. All right, Joe. We will be back same time, same place tomorrow. So for Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see